What made Alvin smell bad was all the decay in his mouth. You lose your teeth when you've got problems, Dr. Lieberfarb explained after looking around with his little mirror and saying, "Uh-oh," 19 times. And that very afternoon he started drilling. He was going to do all that work for nothing because Alvin had volunteered to fight the fascists and because, unlike the rich Jews, who astonished my father by imagining themselves secure in Lindbergh's America, Lieberfarb remained undiluted about what the many Hitlers of this world might yet have in store for us. 19 gold inlays was a big deal, but that's how he showed solidarity with my father, my mother, and me, and the Democrats, as opposed to Uncle Monty, Aunt Evelyn, Sandy, and all the Republicans currently enjoying their countrymen's love. 19 inlays also took a long time, particularly for a dentist who trained in night school while working days packing cargo trays at Port Newark, and whose touch was never that light. Lieberfarb was drilling away for months, but within the first few weeks enough of the rot had been removed so that it was no longer such a trial to be sleeping more or less next to Alvin's mouth. The stump was something else. Broken down means that the end of the stump goes bad. It opens up, it cracks, it gets infected. There are boils, sores, edema, and you can't walk on it without the prosthesis. Or you can't walk on it with the prosthesis, so you have to be without it and resort to crutches until it heals and can take the pressure without breaking down again. At fault was the fit of the artificial leg. The doctors would tell him, "You've lost your fit." But he hadn't lost his fit. He never had a fit, Alvin said, because the leg maker hadn't got the measurements right to begin with. "How long does it take to heal?" I asked him the night he finally told me what broken down meant. Sandy, up at the front of the house, and my parents in their bedroom had already been asleep for hours. And so, too, were Alvin and I when he began to shout, "Dance! Dance!" and with a frightening gasp shot upright in his bed, wide awake. When I flipped on the night lamp and saw him covered with sweat, I got up and opened the bedroom door, and though suddenly covered in sweat myself, I tiptoed across the little back foyer, not to my parents' room, however, to report what had happened, but to the bathroom to get Alvin a towel. He used it to mop his face and his neck, and then pulled off his pajama shirt to wipe his chest and his underarms. And now, at last, I saw what had become of the upper man since the lower man had been blown apart. No wounds, stitches, or disfiguring scars, but no strength either, just the pale skin of a sickly boy adhering to the knobs and ridges of bone. This was our 4th night together. On the first 3 nights, Alvin had been careful to change into his pajamas in the bathroom, and then hop back to hang his clothes in the closet. And since he used the bathroom again to dress in the mornings, I hadn't as yet had to look at the stump and could pretend I didn't know it was there. At night, I turned to the wall, and fatigued by all my worries, fell right off to sleep, and remained asleep until sometime in the early hours when Alvin got up and hopped to the bathroom and back to bed. He did all this without turning on the light, and I lay there afraid he was going to bang into something and crash to the floor. At night, his every move made me want to run away, and not merely from the stump. It was on this 4th night, when Alvin had finished drying himself off with the towel, and was lying there in just his pajama bottoms, that he pulled up his pajama's left leg to take a look at the stump. I supposed this was a hopeful sign that he was starting to be less crazy, agitated, at least with me, but I still didn't want to look his way, and so I did, trying to be a soldier in my bed. What I saw, extending down from his knee joint, was something 5 or 6 inches long that resembled the elongated head of a featureless animal, something on which Sandy, with just a few well-placed strokes, could have crayoned eyes, a nose, a mouth, teeth, and ears, and turned it into the likeness of a rat. What I saw was what the word stump describes, the blunt remnant of something whole that belonged there and once had been there. If you didn't know what a leg looked like, this one might have seemed normal to you, given how the hairless skin was rounded off softly at the abbreviated end, as though it were nature's handiwork and not the result of a trying sequence of medical amputations. "Is it healed?" I asked him. Not yet. How long will it take? Forever, he replied. I was stunned. Then this is endless, I thought. Extremely frustrating, Alvin said. You get on the leg they make for you and the stump breaks down. You get on crutches and it starts to swell up. The stump goes bad whatever you do. The stump goes bad whatever you do. Get my bandages from the dresser. I did as he told me. I was going to have to handle the beige elasticized wrappings he used to prevent his stump from swelling when the artificial leg was off. They were oiled up in a corner of the drawer beside his socks. Each was about 3 inches wide and had a large safety pin stuck through the end to keep it from unrolling. I no more wanted to plunge my hand into that drawer than to go down to the cellar and stick it into the wringer. But I did, and when I delivered the bandages to the bed, one in each fist, he said, "Good boy," and was able to make me laugh by patting my head like a dog's. Afraid to see what came next, I sat on my bed and watched. "You put this bandage on," he explained, "to keep it from blowing up." He held the stump in one hand and with the other undid the safety pin and began to unroll one of the bandages in a crisscrossing pattern over the stump and on up the knee joint, and then, several inches beyond that. "You put this bandage on to keep it from blowing up," he repeated, the words wearily with exaggerated patience. "But you don't want bandages over the breakdown, because that won't let the breakdown heal. So you're just going back and forth until you're nuts." When he finished unrolling the bandage and inserted the safety pin to fasten the end, he showed me the results. "You have to pull it tight, you see?" He began a similar routine with the second bandage. The stump, when he was through with it, again reminded me of a small animal, this time one whose head had been muzzled extra carefully to prevent it from sinking its razor-sharp teeth into the head of its captor. How do you learn that?" I asked him. "You don't have to learn. You have to put it on. Or you just put it on, except," he suddenly announced, "it's too goddamn tight. Maybe you do have to learn. Goddamn son of a bitch, it's either too fucking loose or too fucking tight. It makes you nuts, the whole goddamn thing." He removed the safety pin that fastened the second bandage and then undid both bandages in order to start again. "You can see," he told me, struggling now to suppress disgust with the futility of everything, "how good at doing this you get," and resumed the rewrapping, which, like the healing, appeared destined to go on in our bedroom forever. The next day, when school was over, I ran straight home to a house that I knew would be empty. Alvin was at the dentist, Sandy was off somewhere with Aunt Evelyn, the two of them inexplicably helping Lindbergh achieve his ends, and my parents wouldn't be back from work until supper time. As Alvin had settled on using the daytime hours to allow the breakdown to heal unbandaged, and the nights to wrap the stump to prevent the swelling, I readily found the two bandages in the corner of the top dresser drawer where he'd returned them rolled up that morning. I sat on the edge of my bed, turned up my left trouser leg, and shocked to realize that what remained of Alvin's leg was not much bigger around than my own, set out to bandage myself. I'd spent the day at school mentally running through what I'd watched him do the night before. But at 3:20 when I got home, I'd only just started to wrap the first bandage around an imaginary stump of my own, when, against the flesh below my knee, I felt what turned out to be a ragged scab from the ulcerated underside of Alvin's stump. The scab must have come loose during the night. Alvin had either ignored it or failed to notice it, and now it was stuck to me, and I was out way beyond what I could deal with. Though the heaves began in the bedroom, by racing for the back door and then down the back stairway to the cellar, I managed to position my head over the double sink seconds before the real puking began. To find myself alone in the dark cavern of the cellar was an ordeal under any circumstances, and not only because of the wringer, with its smudged frieze of mold and mildew running along the cracking whitewashed walls, stains in every hue of the excremental rainbow, and seepage blotches that looked as if they'd leaked from a corpse. The cellar was a ghoulish realm apart, extending beneath the whole of the house and deriving no light at all from the half-dozen slits of grime-clouded glass that looked onto the cement of the alleyways and the weedy front yard. There were several saucer-sized drains sunk into the bottom of a sloping concavity at the middle of the concrete floor. Secured in the mouth of each was a heavy black disc pierced by the concentric dime-sized perforations from which, with no difficulty, I imagined vaporous creatures spiraling malevolently up from the earth's innards into my life. The cellar was a place bereft not just of a sunny window, but of every human assurance, and when I came to study Greek and Roman mythology in a freshman high school class and read in the textbook about Hades, Cerberus, and the river Styx, it was always our cellar that I was reminded of. One 30-watt bulb hung over the wash-tub into which I'd vomited. A second hung in the vicinity of the coal furnaces, ablaze and bulkily aligned together, like the three-personed Pluto of our underworld, and another, almost always burned out, was suspended from an electrical cord inside each of the storage bins. I could never accept that the winter-time responsibility would fall to me for shoveling coal into our family's furnace first thing each morning, then banking the fire before going to bed, and once a day carrying a pailful of cold ashes out to the ash can in the backyard. Sandy had by now grown strong enough to take over from my father, and in a few more years, when he was off like every other 18-year-old American boy to receive his 24 months of military training in President Lindbergh's new citizen army, I would inherit the job and relinquish it only when I too was conscripted. Imagining a future when I'd be in the cellar, manning the furnace, all alone, was, at 9, as upsetting as thinking about the inevitability of dying, which had also begun tormenting me in bed every night. But I mainly feared the cellar because of those who were already dead, my 2 grandfathers, my mother's mother, and the aunt and uncle who once constituted Alvin's family. Their bodies may have been interred just off Route 1 on the Newark-Elizabeth line, but in order to patrol our affairs and scrutinize our conduct, their ghosts resided 2 stories beneath our flat. I had little or no recollection of any of them other than of the grandmother who died when I was 6, and yet, whenever I was headed for the cellar by myself, I took care to warn each in turn that I was on my way and to beg them to keep their distance, and not to besiege me once I was in their midst. When Sandy was my age, he used to arm himself against his brand of fear by barreling down the cellar stairs, shouting, "Bad guys, I know you're down there, I've got a gun!" While I would descend whispering, "I'm sorry for whatever I did that was wrong." There was the ringer, the drains, the dead. Actually, we'll pause there.